Hey everybody, welcome to another episode here on Bully Whispers, and we are here today to discuss Slimothy Charles.
Y'all never heard of Juicy Smoothie?
Slimothy Charles is an enforcer from Baltimore. His friends call him Slim, and he is known to be both ruthless and loyal. However, despite his claim,
Meaning no disrespect, but I ain't cut out to be no CEO.
a good case can be made that not only was he cut out to be a CEO, but that he actually wanted to be one the whole time. So in evaluating this claim, we will start by examining his mentality, before disproving some of the more popular perceptions regarding his character, and then end by looking at his life chronologically, including a couple of suspicious actions, where we will see things start falling into place once his true motives and personality are understood. Throughout the show, Slim is seen mostly as just an effective enforcer, both by other characters,
Not a rumble tumble nigga like Slim.
and largely by the audience as well, but this is not the case, which he shows us right away with his first couple lines on the series.
Our people got to stand somewhere, don't it?
While this first line may seem to confirm a street-level mentality compared to Stringer's more expanded view, his follow-up question
But what if they don't cop out re-up, though?
shows that he actually has more of a realistic understanding of Stringer's philosophy than Stringer does. After all, Stringer's argument regarding the success of Japanese cars in America falls remarkably flat when you consider A, they were only successful because Americans opened up dealerships for their cars, which is essentially copying their re-up, and B, the Ford dealership wasn't going to start shooting all the Toyota salesmen if they opened up a dealership in town. By the end, the fact that he uses the phrase CEO when turning down the offer cements the fact that he does have the higher mentality needed to be one. He didn't say king like the Barksdale organization or talk about the crown like Marlo. He said CEO. Now, it could be argued that he phrased it that way because he didn't want to piss Marlo off, but a CEO is the head person as well, so the sentiment would remain the same. So either way, even though both are the top position, the difference between a king and a CEO is that while a king has almost total control, a CEO is expected to be able to wheel and deal. In that sense, Slim may be showing himself to be more of a manipulator like Prop Joe than a bulldozer like Marlo or Avon, which is probably a large part of why he ends the series with the control of the connection. At this point, many of you may be saying that he made it to the top because he was a loyal soldier with a good reputation who made it because Cheese sold out Prop Joe and that scheming had nothing to do with it, which is exactly how a master puppeteer would make it look. So let's start with his level of loyalty. His perception as a loyal soldier begins early with Avon, continues throughout the show, and is seemingly cemented when he killed Cheese.
That was for Joe.
This sentimental motherfucker just cost us money.
Now we know that Slim is not sentimental due to this line,
Yeah, now, well, the thing about the old days, they the old days.
which also casts a bit of a shadow over his level of loyalty, but there are a few other things to keep in mind here as well. First off, he was a mercenary. He was a soldier for hire, and therefore his loyalty was to the paycheck, not the person. Remember, Avon hired him for muscle, and I doubt he just picked him up at random out in front of a Home Depot like Cuddy got picked up to do yard work. Slim worked for at least one other person before Avon, and after Avon he went to their East Side rival Prop Joe. It's at this point that I must address the popular fan theory that Slim was with Avon the whole time, and perhaps Avon will someday get out of jail with his organization intact. Even assuming that Avon sold the Connect to Marlo knowing he would take Prop Joe out and been taken out himself shortly thereafter, which I evaluate in my Avon vs. Marlo episode, this still doesn't explain why Slim and them would have to pay Marlo for it after he got arrested. Word would have made it to Avon through the grapevine that Marlo was getting out, so if Avon was still with Slim, why would Slim need to pay Marlo for an introduction that Avon could give him? He wouldn't have to, but he did, and that's because they weren't together like that anymore. Now, while it may seem like shooting Cheese for Prop Joe was proof of his loyalty, and I'm not saying that loyalty wasn't at all a factor, there's one big thing to keep in mind. Let's take Prop Joe's death out of this and set aside all external factors. This was the first time Slim had the chance to significantly increase his power by killing a teammate, and he took it. If he had killed Avon or Prop Joe when he was with them, he still wouldn't have their connection, nor the support of their organization, so a takeover in that manner would be unlikely to be successful. In fact, the only other time we see him in a position to significantly increase his power by taking out a teammate is with Stringer Bell, and while killing Stringer wouldn't have worked for many of the same reasons we just talked about, We do see him consistently undermine Stringer during his time with the Barksdales, which brings us to the timeline of Slim's life. Quick side note, while it obviously isn't connected, Slim's immediate tension with Stringer is a little funny considering Stringer's dismissal of go-go music in Season 2 and the fact that in real life, Anwan Glover, the guy who plays Slim, is a founding member of Backyard Band, which is a go-go band out of DC. Well, I guess almost all of them would be from the DMV because go-go is a DC thing. But anyways, when evaluating his time on the show, we will divide it into two parts, the Avon era and the Prop Joe era. When evaluating his time with Avon, there are three main instances we will focus on, and the first is the breaking of the Sunday truce. When Omar was spotted, the first call was to Slim.
Who you calling? Slim Charles, man. Nigga probably sleeping in.
While this may not have meant much at the time, since we were just getting to know Slim, we end up finding out how reliable he is, which would make this very much out of character. However, if you look at it through the lens that he is more manipulative than we thought, then his not answering the phone may very well have been intentional. The thing to remember here is that Slim didn't want to go after Omar to begin with.
You sure you want us on Marlo and Omar both? I mean, Omar ain't come back on us since we got his bitch.
So when he gets a call from the crew assigned to look for Omar, he knows what it is. Throw on top of that the fact that it's Sunday, and Slim is in a no-win situation if he answers the phone. Had he answered it, he would have either had to say yes and face the backlash for breaking the Sunday truce, or he would have had to say no and faced a potential backlash for passing up the opportunity. By not answering, he passed the buck on to Stringer, who ended up catching the heat for breaking the Sunday truce and not getting Omar, which further weakened Stringer's position. The next thing to look at is that shortly after this, he assigns people to Stringer for protection.
Slim said it'd stick to you for protection.
Just like not answering the phone, at the time this seemed reasonable, but assuming Slim is scheming, this could just as easily be surveillance. After all, by this point, it's obvious the soldiers have more respect for Slim than they do for Stringer, so they would likely be more than willing to do it. The last thing we will look at with the Barksdales is when Stringer approaches him about killing Clay Davis.
Where Avon at?
He'll be along shortly.
Avon's not going to be along shortly. Avon is right there. Slim is clearly creating a buffer between Avon and Stringer, which serves two purposes for Slim. First, he puts himself closer to Avon than Stringer is, which seems to have worked since by that point, Slim appears to be more of Avon's number two man than Stringer does. And second, Stringer feels more comfortable going directly to Slim and not to Avon.
That's good, because I came to see you anyway.
In setting up this dynamic, Slim allows Stringer to continue to gather enough rope to hang himself, which he almost does right then and there in asking for Clay Davis to be killed. During Slim's time with the Barksdales, it's easy to view those things as just happenstance, like not answering the phone, or just him being a good and loyal soldier, because as the audience, we know of all the shady stuff Stringer is doing, but you have to remember that Slim doesn't know about D'Angelo, side deals, etc. Moving on from here, it's easy to disregard those things because, for the most part, he was a good and loyal soldier for Prop Joe. Although he did antagonize Marlo more than Joe, he also warned Joe about both Marlo and Cheese, but there is one scene we should take a close look at.
Cheese gonna watch the shot. You gonna watch Cheese.
Later that very same episode, Cheese gives Prop Joe up to Marlo for execution, and where was Slim? Not watching Cheese, that's for sure. Now letting Prop Joe die would be a risky move for Slim in an attempt to move up, since he knew Marlo would control the connect, and he doesn't like Marlo. However, after Prop Joe's death is the first time we see Slim in a position to be in control of large amounts of product.
Slim, I want you to take over Hungry Man's slice of the cake.
After all, Prop Joe even left Cheese in charge of the shop, not Slim, which may have been part of the reason Slim let it happen. He realized that he would never be more than muscle in Prop Joe's eyes if Prop Joe would put Cheese in charge before him. At this point, Slim has one of the two things he would need to step into a position of real power. He has the support of the organization, he does not have the connect, but unlike before with Prop Joe or Avon, the people above him now are hated and could be taken out without fear of a backlash, if only he had the connect. Now, while Slim never worked for Marlo, he dealt with him enough to know that he wasn't as careful as Prop Joe when it comes to law enforcement, and his style of doing business had ruffled a lot of feathers, so it's easy to imagine that Slim could foresee Marlo's reign being short. When Marlo's crew's time at the top was cut short, Slim was right there to step into the connection, and took the opportunity to kill the one person who would be most detrimental to the business moving forward, Cheese. Since no one liked cheese, no one cared, but this action had one other very significant impact as well. It was a show of tremendous power in front of a group that would need to view you that way in order to take you seriously, and if they didn't before, they did now. After all, that's a bunch of high-level distributors, and Slim went from being Prop Joe's muscle attending the meetings, skipped ahead of all of them, to being one of the people actually at the table with the Connect, not just another co-op member. In that regard, Slim is in a much better position to steal Stringer's dream than Marlo. Stringer never wanted to be out of the game entirely. He said it himself. He wants to finance packages they will never see and collect the money. Stringer wanted to be like a Paul Castellano, mostly a businessman who is financed by the underworld and can use those connections as leverage in negotiations. While we never get to see if Slim starts venturing into the legitimate world, he certainly is smart enough to, and that's the aspect of Slim that is most overlooked. People are so focused on how tough, loyal, and stoic he is that they forget about his intelligence, which would make it very easy for Avon, Prop Joe, and the audience to miss schemes unfolding right in front of them. Well, thanks for watching this episode here on Bully Whispers. As always, like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you at the next score.